All right, so today we are upping our game and we are starting to work at three variable systems of equations with matrices. Okay, so you have the same rules to solve a three system matrix as you do, or three variable matrix as you do a two variable matrix. Okay, so the same rules apply. You can switch two rows, you can multiply a row by a number, or you can add two rows together. Okay, or some combination of those things. Okay, so those are the only things that you're allowed to do. Now, the big things to remember is make sure that you always finish a column, so the up and down, before you move to a different row sideways. Okay, that's a really important thing. You want to make sure that you finish doing a whole column, because once you get the one, you need zeros in the other spots so that when you're working with other sections, you don't mess up your one again. Okay. And then one step, this is the one that people tend to get stuck on a lot. You are almost always going to need to divide your final row by a number to get your final one. Okay. So when you have two columns done and you're down to your last column, right? Most of the time, your step is going to be to divide a row by a number. Okay. And we'll see that as we go. So let's take a look at this example. So the first thing I'm going to do is just set up my matrix. Same way that we've been doing, put a line between the variable side and the answer side. So I'm going to have, let's see, 1, 2, negative 1, 3, 1, 3, negative 1, 4, 1, negative 1, 1, 4. Be really careful when you copy these, because it's the absolute worst to do a whole thing out and get it completely wrong and realize it's because, oh, that was supposed to be a negative 1 and I wrote a positive 1. Okay, so from here, right, we are going to start. We need a 1 in any of our key locations. This one's pretty friendly because we have a bunch of 1s in here. So we could start, we got a 1 in the correct spot here or here. And you can start with either one of those columns. You don't have to start with the first column. It could very well be the third column, and that's fine. Okay, I'm going to start with this guy though. So since I already have my 1, I'm going to use that to clear the rest of the column. Okay, so I'm going to clear the rest of the column. So what I'm going to do to get rid of this guy is I'm going to multiply this guy by the opposite number and add them together. So I'm going to multiply negative 1 times row 1, add it to row 2, and put that answer in row 2. Okay. I always do that. Like, you might be looking at it and saying, well, why can't I just subtract them? You could subtract them, but I find that people make a lot more mistakes when they try to subtract than they do if they just add negatives. Okay. So I'm just going to copy that over here to do some work. So it'd be negative 1, negative 2, 1, negative 3. Then I'm going to copy row 2. Okay. You can see we end up with a lot of numbers. So it just makes it a lot easier if you do the work out to the side. All right. So then my first row stays the same. My last row stays the same, right? Because I said that I was going to put my answer into row 2. And then let's see, when we add these together, this adds to 0, that adds to 1, that adds to 0, that adds to 1. So I've got 0, 1, 0, 1. Okay, so now again, I want to finish this column. So definitely always finish the column before you move on to another one. Okay, because what I see sometimes is people be like, oh, I can use this one to cancel this guy. You can, but you're probably going to screw yourself up if you start doing that. Okay, so finish the column first. So to get rid of this one down here, I'm going to multiply the top row by the opposite of this number and then add them together. So I'm multiplying row 1 by negative 1, adding it to row 3, and I'm putting my answer in row 3. So again, I'm just going to do that workout. So there's negative 1 times the first row. I'm copying the second row below it. So that's going to add to 0, negative 3, 2, and 1. All right, so over here, my top 2 rows didn't change because I said I was going to write my new answer in the third row. Okay, and that new answer is now going to come down here. So 0, negative 3, 2, 1. All right, and now we have our first column done. We've got a 1 in our key location and then zeros everywhere else. So now I'm going to turn my attention to the other 2 columns. And again, I'm looking for a 1. So this one's pretty convenient. I already have the 1 where it's supposed to be. So that's great. I can use that to help me out. So I'm going to use this 1 to clear the rest of the column. And again, the way I do that is I'm going to multiply that row by the opposite of the number I want to get rid of, so negative 2 in this case, and then add them together. So I'm doing -2 times row 2. So this row times the opposite of that row, number that you want to get rid of, right? Add that to the first row and put it in the first row. Okay, so that's -2 times row 2 would be 0, -2, 0, -2, row 1, just copying it. When I add that together, I get 1, 0, -1, 1. All right, and that is my new top row. Okay, the other two rows did not change. Okay, so we're getting there. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing. I need to multiply this guy by the opposite number of whatever's written there. So that's a -3, so I'm going to multiply it by 3. So I'm going to do 3 times row 2, add it to row 3, and put it in row 3. So that's going to be, let's see, 0303. It's almost Derry's zip code. Copying the other one down here. I'm going to add this together, 0024. All right, so again, top row didn't change. Second row didn't change. And I said I was going to put this in the third row. So 0024. All right, and we're getting there. Okay, so now this is the part, right? This is the note that I set up top. You're almost always going to need to divide the final row by a number to get your final one. Okay, so we are now at a point where we have 2 columns completely done, and we're down to our last column. So what your step is going to be when you get here, 2 columns finished and you need to get the last one, is you're going to divide this row by a number to make that into a 1. So this guy's a 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take row 3 and I'm just going to divide the whole row by 2 and put it back into row 3. Because that's going to get me the 001 that I needed. Right, and then my other 2 rows didn't change. Okay, and then we're really close, right? So I actually already have a 0 here, so that's really nice. I just have to clear out this guy here. So all I have to do is add these 2 rows together and it'll cancel out because it's already the opposite, right? So I'm just going to do row 3 plus row 1. And I'm going to put it back into row 1. Okay, so row 3 was 0, 0, 1, 2. Row 1, 1, 0, -1, 1. Add that together. Right, and that's my new row 1. So 1, 0, 0, 3. My other 2 rows did not change. Okay, and then that, we're done, right? We now have this over here. Right, that's as our set up as our diagonal matrix, right? All 1s here on the main diagonal, 0s everywhere else. So my final answer, remember you just write your answer as a point. It's going to be the point 3, 1, 2. Okay, that is the point that makes this 3-dimensional system equal each other. Okay, so it's the same thing as what we did with the 2x2 matrices. It's just longer. As you can see, there are many, many, many steps. And the thing that you have to be really careful of is that if you make a silly mistake, like you add here and you say that that's -1 instead of +1, then that's going to screw you up for the entire rest of the problem. Okay, and it's going to make it a lot harder than it needs to be. So you need to be really, 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 really careful about adding, subtracting your negative numbers. Make sure you don't drop any signs. Don't make any silly mistakes, okay? All right, also, you should always be able to do all of these problems without any fractions, okay? And that's what I'm gonna expect to see from you on your assessments. Okay, so you're gonna need to be able to do these without using any fractions anywhere. All right, so let's take a look at our next problem. Seems like a good time to change colors. Okay, so this guy, the thing that I want you to notice is that, see how this one we got an X, a Y, and a Z, but these 2 were missing a letter in each one? So what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna add in whatever the missing letter is. This one I'm gonna add in a 0Z. This one I'm gonna add in a 0Y because that's the part that's missing. So when I write out my system, it's gonna be 1, 1, 2, 5 on the top row. And then the next one, 3 and 2, because that was X and Y, are missing Z as a 0, 4. And then in the bottom one, the 2 was the X, we're missing a Y, so that's a 0, Z is -1, and that's 2. Okay, so anytime you're missing a number, you need to plug in a 0 for it. Okay, so from here, we're going to do the same thing. Start by looking for a 1 in any of your key positions. It could be here or here or here. Remember, you could swap rows. So like if I had needed to, I could swap these 2 rows to get a 1 here. Okay, or I could multiply this row by -1 to get a +1 there. But I've got a 1 here, so I'm going to use that one. So again, the step is multiply this row by the opposite of whatever this number is. Okay, so this is a 3, so the opposite of 3 is -3. So I'm going to do -3 times row 1. I'm going to add that to row 2 and put it in row 2. Doing my workout, so I'm doing -3 times row 1 is going to be -3, -3, -6, -15. Copying the next row with it. And when I add that together, that'll be 0. That's -1, -6, -11. Okay, so the first row and the last row didn't change. And my new middle row is 0, -1, -6, -11. All right, now we're gonna do the same thing to get rid of this 2. So again, finish the column before you worry about doing anything else. So I'm gonna take this guy, I'm gonna multiply by the opposite of this and then add them together. So -2 times the first row plus the third row, put it in the third row. So -2 times row 1. Okay, and then I'm adding this bottom row to this. So that's going to be 0, -2, -5, -8. Okay, so top 2 rows did not change. And this guy, we said we were putting in row 3. So this is going into row 3. All right, and now we're done with that column. Cool, so now we need to move on to another column. So I'm looking at this and I don't automatically have either a one in either one of those positions, and I can't just easily swap rows to get it. So there's a few different things that you can do at this point. You could do something creative where like you could say, oh, well, if I multiplied this row by -1 and added it to this one, that would get me 1. Okay, so you could do something like that. Or the easiest thing to do with this guy is if I just multiply the second row by -1. Because remember, you're allowed to multiply a row by a number. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do -1 times row 2 and just put it back into row 2. Sometimes you'll have to multiply by a number. Sometimes you'll divide by a number. It just kind of depends. So the first ones and the last ones don't change. But now my middle one is 0, +1, +6, +11. Okay, the one thing that I wanted to caution you about is that when you're at this step and you're looking for your next one, don't touch the row that you've already gotten your 1 in. Okay, you want to make sure that you stick with the row that has the 2 rows that have 0s in them. Okay, because think about it, right? If I were to try to mess around and add this guy somehow to one of these to get a 1, you're going to screw up your first column. Okay, so once you get to a point where 2 of your numbers are 0s and the other one's still a 1, don't touch that one while you're trying to get your next one in place. Okay, so now from here, we're going to just keep going, right? So I'm going to multiply this by the opposite of whatever that is. So in this case, I'm multiplying row 2 by -1. So I'm doing -1 times row 2. I'm adding that to row 1, and I'm putting it in row 1. So that's going to be 0, -1, -6, -11. Copy the first row below it, and then add them together. Okay, I color coded that wrong. That should have gone like that. Okay, so our new matrix, right? We just changed the first row, but the other 2 rows stay the same. All right, and our new top row is 1, 0, -4, -6. All right, now we're going to finish off the rest of this column. So I'm going to multiply this by +2, right? Opposite sign of the thing we want to get rid of. So I'm doing +2 times row 2, and I'm adding it to row 3 and putting it in row 3. So that's going to be 0, 2, 12, 22. 0, -2, -5, -8. Add this together. That's going to be 7. That's going to be 16, I believe. That doesn't sound right. 14. Yeah, 14. That sounds better. Okay. Be really careful with those calculation errors, because if I had put 16 down and kept it 16, I'd have been in trouble. Okay, so that's my new row 3. So the first 2 rows are staying the same. And then this is my new 3rd row, so 0, 0, 7, 14. Okay, and now we've got our first 2 columns done. So now we're focusing on this last column, and I need to make this guy into a 1. I can't use either of these to do it, okay? Because you might be thinking, oh, well, like, just do this one and multiply that by -1 and add them together. But if I do that, then that's going to make this not be a 0 anymore. So that's going to screw me up. Okay, so once you get down to this point, you're always just going to multiply or divide by a number. If I divide this row by 7, that's going to get me my 1 here. So that's going to be my next step, is I'm going to do row 3 divided by 7 and put it back into row 3. So top 2 rows stay the same. And my new bottom row is going to be 0, 0, 1, 2. Ooh, I'm going to have to write really small in the hopes of fitting this on here. I am very almost out of room. Okay, so I have to multiply this guy by the opposite of this one. So I'm multiplying the row 3 by 4. So 4 times row 3, add that to row 1, put it in row 1. Okay, so 4 times row 3. Oh man, I just messed up my color coding again. Oh, can you believe it? All right, so 4 times row 3 would be 0, 0, 4, 8, plus row 1, 1, 0, -4, -6. Add that together, that's 1, 0, 0, 2. So that's my new row 1. My other 2 rows didn't change. Okay. And then I got one more step, right? I have to multiply this guy by -6, excuse me. -6 to get those that they'll add together. So I'm going to do -6 times row 3 and add that to row 2 and put it in row 2. So -6 times row 3 is going to be 0, 0, -6, -12. I'm adding that to 0, 1, 6, 11. Okay, I'm not going to write that answer in there just because I don't have enough room. Okay, so the top row doesn't change, 1, 0, 0, 2. The bottom row didn't change. Right? And when I add these together, that's going to be a 0, 1, 0. And then -12 plus 11 is -1. So I'm just barely squeezing this in here. And then make sure you write your final answer as a point. 2, -1, 2. All right, and there's my final answer. So again, you know you're done when you have 1s along your main diagonal, 0s everywhere else, and then you can just grab these numbers to give your final answer of your point. Okay, so matrices, these are long, they have a lot of steps, and there's a lot of places to screw up. When you take your assessment on this, you're not going to have 5 of these on your assessment. You don't have enough time to do that. It's usually going to be like, you're going to have like 1 or 2, okay? So you really have to make sure that you know what you're doing, because there's not going to be a lot of space for you to like make up points on other problems, because every one of these is long and time consuming. All right, but again, the key things that you're doing, start with a 1 and then use it to clear the rest of the column. Multiply by the opposite of the number that you need to make into a 0, and then add them together, right? So I took this 1, I multiplied by -1 and added it there. Took this guy, multiplied by -1 and added it there. When I had this one, I multiplied by -2 and added it here. I multiplied by +3 and added it here. Okay, once you get down to having 2 complete columns done, your next step is just going to be divide by whatever this number is to make that into a 1. And then back to the same thing, multiply by the opposite of this one and add them together. Okay, and that's what your steps are. So it's really, I mean, when you look at this, there are really basically only 3 things you're ever doing. Okay, you're only ever doing this multiply by the opposite and add them together, or dividing a row by a number, or sometimes swapping rows, which I don't think we actually did on this page, but swapping rows is the other thing that you'll do sometimes. So it's really basically 3 steps, and you just have to figure out which of those 3 things you have to do.